Let me just make a few quick announcements about the week in store here. First of all, today's talk doesn't have a corresponding paper behind it, but if you go to my homepage, I have a website called publicationshare.com. You have to believe in the power of sharing. So I have 8 share sites. One is called Publication Share, and a lot of my publications are there. You can download them. A lot of my talks are at a website called trainingshare.com. So you can download talks like this one. And actually, if you go to my homepage, I gave this particular talk for the first time about a month and a half ago to my graduate students, and they video streamed it. And so you could have your friends could watch it. You could watch it later if I go a bit fast here. You can rewatch it. So that's one quick pointer. So in terms of today, in terms of tomorrow, the blended learning handbook that Yoram just mentioned, the opening and closing chapters, my chapters ends the book, and my co-editor's chapter starts it, are free. Also at Publication Share, you can get the starting and last chapters for free. Judith Ram is here somewhere. Wave your hand. There you are. And Rafi, is he here yet? He's coming. Yeah, they have a chapter in the book of what's going on in Tel Aviv. So there is a chapter here from Israel, and one of the 39 chapters in the book. And again, I'll go through the whole book in an hour tomorrow. I was told I had an hour and a half. There's Rafi. Speaking of Rafi. So Rafi has a chapter in the book. Of course, if he keeps coming late, I won't invite him anymore. But so we've got 39 chapters. I'll try and summarize all 39 in 1 hour so you don't have to buy the book. But they told me I had an hour and a half, so I'm going to, tonight, originally I had an hour and a half, I have an hour. So the third one on Wednesday on the Perfect E Storm does have a paper wrapped around it. If you go to my homepage, if you go to Publication Share, you can download Part 1 and Part 2 on the Perfect E Storm that I wrote for the Observatory on Borderless Higher Education in London. And it's now available for free. Download it. For 6 months I couldn't share it. And the fourth paper, the fourth article is on open source and open courseware. It's called Oops, I Didn't Mean to Share That. It really links the book. If you've heard of the book, The World is Flat. Has anyone heard that book, The World is Flat? I talk about how the learning world's become flat and how open source and open courseware and many other things. So Thursdays is the most technology-oriented talk. And I'd say tomorrow's technology-oriented on the front end and practice on the back end. Tomorrow's got the most practical things you can use in your classes on the back end. On the front end is most on technology. It has situations and solutions. So I'll often just talk about pedagogy. The 4 talks here this week aren't really about pedagogy, but I'll end the Perfect E Storm talk with 15 pedagogical ideas, and I'll end the blended learning talk with about 3 dozen ideas for pedagogy. So Tuesday and Wednesday I'll get into pedagogy. Thursday won't talk much about pedagogy, but you can learn about pedagogy with all the technologies I go through. Today I'm going to talk about research. That's the title. And originally the title today was called Just a Lot of Bunk, and then Research Reflections and Results. But they cut the Just a Lot of Bunk out, but it'll just be mostly my research here that I go through today. It won't be everyone else's in the world and what they've been doing in terms of online teaching and learning. It'll be mostly what we've done at Indiana over the past, a little more than the past decade. So that kind of gets you through the 4 and to situate yourself. And the fourth one is going to be video streamed, so you can be sitting in your desk and watch it. You don't have to come to the room. They're going to broadcast the fourth one, and you can rewatch it. They'll probably store all these. We've run out of handouts, and Yoram has, I don't know if you've been able to pass those on to someone to make copies, but we had 50, and they went just like that. So you want to make any announcement about the handouts?
Let's see if we can make more later.
Yeah, okay, there you go. So if you want a handout, you have to hit him up really hard after. I may have one extra sitting here if you didn't get one. The first one who sees me gets one. All right, well, when we were coming Saturday from the airport, Yoram took me to his house in Jerusalem, showed me all around. He said, could you please give the people kind of an overview before you jump into your 10 years of research, give them the background of where you're coming from. And I hadn't had that in my talk, so I spent the past day and a half adding that in. It's not even in your handout. So all I've been doing, right? All I've been doing is worrying about the front end of this particular talk and where we're going to go. And he asked if I could cover perspectives, theoretical perspectives. And I'll give you 3 perspectives that link into my research and 12 premises wrapped around that research. The first perspective comes from our American Psychological Association, which talks about being learner-centered. How do you create a learner-centered as opposed to an instructor-centered classroom? And in online environments, e-learning environments, we attract students who want to be more self-determined, want things relevant to them, want choice in their classrooms, and so forth. They want to collaborate some ways. This links into the learner-centered principles. These are free from the American Psych Association. They have videotapes on how to be learner-centered in your classroom and so forth. So some of you may have read my Electronic Collaborators book in 1998. Chapter 2 in that book talks about how learner-centered principles, constructivist principles, and so forth link to the use of technology. If you want to read Chapter 2, go to that same website, Publication Share, scroll down. You can get the chapter on theoretical perspectives. That's all there. We can talk about situated learning and getting people in authentic contexts. We can talk about constructivistic environments and getting people to create, design, build, construct ideas. There are a number of constructivist learning principles that are out there that link into my research. I don't have time to go through all of constructivism for you today. It's not a lecture on constructivism. I'm trying to give you kind of an underpinning for where I'm coming from. You want to build on students' prior knowledge naturally, so they're familiar maybe with some of the contents. You want to make learning relevant and authentic to them. Have activities where they design products, create something at the end, pose hypotheses, contradict one another, debate one another, get involved in dissonance or cognitive dissonance and debate, reflecting on those experiences online in their blogs and whatever technologies you might be using, their wikis and so forth, and we'll talk more about that during the week. So constructivist principles are more about individuals in their environment, whereas social constructivist principles get at the dialogue with their peers and colleagues and comrades in the online environments. And we've designed a number of tools and activities from a social constructivistic standpoint. While learner-centered, while constructivism and situated learning all have something to say about our research, and they all overlap quite significantly, it's the social constructivist perspective that most links to the research that we've done. And so you'll see activities where I have students sharing their ideas cross-culturally with students in Finland, the US, the UK, Peru, Korea, all collaborating online. And I'll come back to those kinds of projects. We'll have activities where we look at scaffolded learning, number 4 in the list there, or mentoring online. Coaching and mentoring is a huge area of growth in e-learning environments, and there's a tremendous potential, whether we're talking about college students, whether we're talking about corporate training, or K-12 secondary students, or middle school, whatever. And then the notion of having choice challenge. Choices. Students want choice. In online, you can build in lots of activities and give them choice instead of everyone does the same thing. Give them 10 things, let them pick 4. I'll come back to that notion as well throughout the week. Number 10, they're on assisted learning. We can't teach anyone anything. All we can do is assist in their learning. And we try to do research on how to assist in one's learning and how to get students to be the teachers instead of the instructors always being the ones teaching or lecturing. My students lecture to each other online, and I'll talk a bit about that as well. All these link back to becoming more active in your environment, active learning principles, hands-on activities, giving choice, giving challenge, multiple viewpoints. They all overlap to some degree, but anyways, there are some perspectives. The 12 premises I'm going to give you, and then I'll get into the research. There are 12. The first premise is that we learn from social interaction with our peers, with experts, with guides, with mentors, that we learn new strategies first on a social plane with someone else, that we internalize those. The second premise of my research is that the mind extends beyond the skin. The mind is in our social networks that we have. It's not just something internal that the constructivists talk about. It's actually in the social networking that we do. That the mind is distributed in society. We have distributed intelligence depending upon all the websites we can access in Google Scholar, or wherever we happen to be going. Our communities of practice, our professional organizations that we're members of that provide us with information. Going to Bunk's TrainingShare.com or Publication Share is a part of your network now, maybe. Participation and success as a student is no longer just a didactic, transmissive process like what I'm doing now. It's one wherein students challenge, transform knowledge, generate knowledge. We had students writing cases on the internet of problems that they saw in schools. Instead of us giving them cases, they wrote their own cases and solved their own cases. And I'll come back to that point. But now learning is a conversation that you can have with students, not just a traditional set of goals and objectives that we're going to impart to students and shove them down their throats. Technology is a part of a piece of this environment. I think really the best metaphor of the next century will be about moving us away from just the constructivist, social constructivist views to think about how to create learning environments. I think we all have to we're creating effective learning environments. And I think that's a simpler way to discuss things for one another. But how do mentors impact on learning? How do peers? How do parents? How does testing? How do textbooks? How does reflection? How does technology? All these things. How do teachers? Teachers have a vital role as well. Premise number 3 is that learning precedes development. We nudge, provoke, push, prod student learning. We push them ahead of where they are, their capabilities. We provide subtle cues and hints and prompts. My dissertation was on computer prompts and writing, and looking at kids internalize writing prompts over time. And we create a keystroke mapping program that let us replay back their papers and watch revision happen and unfold over time. Okay, we prompted and pushed and prodded these middle school kids beyond where they were. A lot of the research I'm going to show you is about that kind of scaffolded learning, pushing beyond where they're at, what's called proleptic instruction, teaching in anticipation of competence. Number 4 premise is cognitive apprenticeship. The internet has become a tool or a means of apprenticing learners by getting them into real-world environments, whether it's reading financial statements of a company and understanding and trying to make sense of them, or doing environmental research and uploading it to the internet and getting feedback from an expert, or going to a nursing home or a hospital or a school and interviewing professionals there and asking them questions about what a nurse does, what a social worker does, what an accountant. I used to be an accountant a long time ago, a CPA in my old life. But that was too boring. I'm sorry, does anyone teach accounting here? Take that back. You know, the Accounting Association had protested online learning. They were out there protesting, we're not going to do online learning. Why? Because it's too boring. Well, I got news for them. I took the face-to-face classes, and they're plenty boring, too. UCLA protested online learning back in 96, 97. They had protest marches going on. York University in Canada had protests going on. Students were out on the protest lines with the faculty at UCLA protesting online learning. I don't know if you're aware of this. But the students were charged a fee for all the online class syllabi put to the internet, the curriculum. Faculty in humanities were forced to put their courses online, and they didn't want to be forced to do it. There was no vote, just told they had to do it. It was top-down, totally top-down. The problem was there was no bottom-up. But today, UCLA is well beyond anyone else. That jump-started them by having them put their syllabi, or curricula, you might call it syllabi here, I don't know, curricula, on the internet. Anyways, a little aside. The internet's a place for mentoring. The internet's a place for apprenticing students' learning and guiding their learning, bringing that more experienced partner. We have practicing teachers mentoring my students who are physics teachers or chemistry teachers in high schools, mentoring my students back in the school. They're apprenticing them, bringing them in as a novice into that teacher education environment. So we take Barbara Rogoff's model of moving us from all teacher-led training to mostly student discovery learning. We move from providing them with the contents. I still test my students. I still believe knowledge is important. But we move from knowledge to activities that are problem-based. A guided learning approach models, demonstrates, and the same thing can be true of the internet-based instruction. You can have some knowledge-based tests on the front end and PBL, problem-based activities on the back end. We gradually cede control, fade instruction. We give the student more power and control over time. And with the internet, you can provide all sorts of resources and scaffold that learning, that they can go to all these resources that they didn't have previously, and then move from those. Brown, Collins, and DeGood, John Seeley Brown, who has the book, The Social Life of Information. Some of you, anyone read that book, The Social Life of Information? A few of you. If you go to his talks at $50,000 a talk, you can You might just read the book, okay? No, he's brilliant. He actually is one of the few people worth the money. But he and Alan Collins and Paul DeGude and Newman all pointed out to the situated learning constructivist approach in 1988, 1989, and mapped out some principles behind the apprenticeship approach, where they talk about how to model, coach, and fade. Tharp and Gallimore wrote a book called Rousing Minds to Life, where they came up with 7 ways to assist in learning. If you take the 7 ways that Tharp and Gallimore talked about, how to cognitively task structure, how to give feedback to students, how to manage learning, how to question, how to directly instruct, and you combine those 7 methods of Tharp and Gallimore with the 6 principles of Brown, Collins, and Newman, and DeGude, you come up with 13 ways to teach online, and I've been looking at these 13 ways. I'll come back to these 13 ways. We can get into a tele-apprenticeship environments, online environments where we apprentice student learning, whether we're in teacher education or business or whatever, computer science, whatever field we might happen to be. The focus, again, I'm going through these premises, then I'm going to get to the research. It's going to be more interactive here in a second, so just bear with me. Principle number 5, GPD. Again, this wasn't in the talk. Yoram has asked for this. I'm hoping this gives the grounding to so we've got things that people can do with very little support over here. So they have wide bandwidth. They don't need much help. So I give Yoram 20 algebra questions. I give Rafi 20 algebra questions. They both get 10 right. Things that give out little support. Rafi needs a lot of support. His GPD, the bandwidth of Yoram is a lot wider. He could take them to the next level a lot quicker. So we're looking at zones of development. What is possible through collaboration with other people. Not what you can do by yourself, but what you can do from prompts, hints, and clues from other people. That's where my research has been the past 10 years to some degree. It's not going to be across all 10 stories. I'm going to tell 10 stories, but that kind of gets at what we can do with the help of peers, parents, coaches, teachers within this zone, and then eventually by ourselves. What we learn socially through interacting with a teacher or expert, we internalize, we appropriate pieces of it and internalize for our own needs. So the expert is out there scaffolding the learning beyond what they can do on their own to the zone of things they can't do by themselves, but they need help. They need help to solve, they need help to come up with solutions or strategize. And so you're pushing them to that next level. Simple concept of assisting in learning. So we take what the learner can do and we push them to that next level. We ask them questions, we directly instruct them. And by the way, direct instruction is about 10 to 15% online in our research, as opposed to 80, 85% in face-to-face. So it's a shifting of the role of the instructor. So we push students to explore the internet in Google Scholar. We push them to articulate their ideas in discussion forums, in chats, and so forth. We've come up with 14 ways to assist in learning online. This is about 12 of the ways. Another way is weaving information or summarizing, but acknowledging students' point of view is about 30% of what people do. We just acknowledge, we agree with what they've said. We acknowledge their presence, and they get some social presence, some social support. But then we push beyond that and question them and give examples. But the big one is misspelled there, number 4, actually it's covered up. Cognitive task structuring. Students get lost online. They need the structures from the instructor. They need the reminders, the hints, and so forth. They need encouragement. They need advice. They need questions that they can ask. Number 8 are learning resources. What are the resources of one's environment? I've already mentioned these. We have many resources out there. Teachers, peers, tests, technology, and so forth, reflection. Number 9, authentic problems. We want to engage people in authentic, real-world activities and problems. We want things that they can approximate, at least real world. Number 10, instead of looking at student achievement test scores, we're analyzing transcripts of their learning. We look at the activity plane. We look at the learning environment. We look at the words. Being a former writing researcher and reading researcher, we're looking at the words that they produce, and students write more online than they ever did face-to-face because they don't realize they're writing so much and reading so much. But the focus from a Vygotskian or social cultural standpoint is on the word meaning or the activity. You can then push down to the individual level and find out if Rafi is really as stupid as he's, no. Or you can push up. You can push up to the institutional level. You can look, it's the meso level, in between the macro, institutional, organizational change, and the micro level of the individual. What's nice about the social cultural activity plane analysis is you can go both ways. Number 11, our premise is that development first takes place externally with other people, then pushes internally. We move from an intrapsychological plane, solving problems with our peers, to an intra-psychological. We take and internalize. So we internalize that social activity as our own independent problem-solving behaviors, if that makes sense. And then finally, and this shouldn't necessarily be the 12th premise, it could have come a lot earlier, but it's this notion that the more intersubjectivity we have with our peers, the more we can have in common with one another, the more that we can, the more shared knowledge we have to negotiate meaning, construct new ideas, to use acronyms and abbreviations, and we both know what each other means. Okay? Programmers sitting down writing code know what each other, we can just use a quick little acronym for what they're doing that summarizes their whole routine that they're going through, or coding system. So intersubjectivity becomes important. The more shared knowledge that we have, we find that students with more shared knowledge show up online more often. Or that I've done relate to models that I've been designing. And over the weekend, Yoram says, well, really one of the models today that you're going through is how is technology changing, pedagogy changing, and culture changing and intertwining over the 10 years of your study. Can you get at how technologies have shifted over 10 years, how the pedagogies have maybe changed, and how people have become more familiar with the internet and now are doing things online that 10 years ago they've been more hesitant to do. Another model or framework I've been working on is moving us away from using technology to enhance what we do, like having CDs and tests on those CDs, to having it extend what we do. Work with students in Finland, like I mentioned earlier, so we extend beyond the four walls of my classroom. Third, we want to or writing cases, their writing cases. And fourth model is we're sharing what we do. And Thursday's talk will get at sharing. So technology can be used to enhance, extend, transform, and now share the curriculum, share our training, share our ideas. Someone I met today and down the hall said she was using this model for training. And many people use this model to look at how we can get people to share their ideas, their syllabi, web resources. We can republish students' work. We can put part of our course online that's graded. We can put a whole course on the internet that's graded, but the students are close by. The students might be located all around the world, or we might put a whole program. There's levels of integrating the web. We can move from just putting a piece of a course online to putting part of a course that's graded to put the whole course. Okay? So, I'm going to go through 10 stories. I was going to start with this, but I hope that the half hour that I spent going through the premise, my theoretical background, has been helpful in telling you these stories now. Questions about my theoretical premise behind this. I'm going to stop at the end of every story for questions. We'll get through about 8 out of 10 stories, I think, in 1 hour. But we'll see. Any questions? Yeah.
What is the target population of these studies?
Good question. Most of I've been doing research in four areas. Most of it's higher education. I've also done K-12 research with kids in schools, middle schools, and high schools. I've done some military research, and I've got one study there. And fourth, some corporate. I don't have any of that in here. Most of what I'm going to show today will be higher education, college, university instruction. Most that I'm going to show today.
Some of them are distance education students, or all of them are campus-based students?
Some are distance, and some are campus. I'll point out where the difference happened, and what's happened is The distance one would be the later, the more recent studies, the 2004 and 2003 studies, more so. Good questions. Most would be blended environments. Okay, now, I've got 10 stories to tell. Let me just go through these. There will be 10 stories. The first story from 93, 94 will be peace, dude, hop off the return key and save me some stress. The second story, what if Vygotsky lived to 100? Number 3, do not ride your bike to work. Number 4, look out for the Russians. Number 5, do you believe in the power of... Oh, you don't have them on... Well, they're very light there. They are on screen. You just can't see it. Oh, they're very light. I wonder why. Projector. They're very... Let me see if I can do that real quick. I didn't check this one screen, but let's see if I can change this to black, if that will work or not. Oh, they're all hot linked, and that's why. Ah. How can I get that to show up? Let me think once here. Yeah, the problem is if I change the background... Leave them not in the display mode. Okay, they're on your handout. First slide on your handout. Second slide on your handout. They're all there. I'll read them again. Number 4 is look out for the Russians. Number 5, do you believe in the power of sharing? Of course, the most important slide we didn't test coming in here. Okay, number 5, do you believe in the power of sharing? Number 6, do you want to be target practice? Number 7, you were in but you were never there. Number 8, who needs a ticket? Number 9, where is Disneyland? And number 10, data at your fingertips. Okay, now I'm going to read through these one more time. I'm just going to read through number 1, number 2, and I want someone to pick out a story for me to tell. Okay? Whoever picks a story that I select gets a CD of everything I've written on e-learning. So, story number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, I don't hear any yelling, number 5, number 6, number 7, number 8. What? Who said number 2? Number 2. Okay, we'll go to number 2. What's your name? Okay, he gets the CD. All right. There's 9 more CDs. Okay, what if Vygotsky had lived to 100? Okay, we got Ben Durham, Piaget, and the other psychologists. You have to figure out who they are. Okay, in 94, 90 to 96, I had a group that formed with me called the Computer Conferencing and Collaborative Writing Group in Indiana, or CCCW. I was a writing researcher originally. We had a book called Electronic Collaborators. Actually, that's the School of Education where I work, which is a demonstration site for technology in education. It was built in 1992 with what in the U.S. we call PORC. It's the only school of education built with PORC. We have 4 distance education suites for video conferencing. We had Cat5 cabling put in the room. I don't know if you want Cat5 cabling, but heavy bandwidth for gigabytes of data to go into that we didn't take advantage of for 8 years because the whole university didn't have the capabilities our building had. So we finally are taking advantage of all the possibilities where every room is high-tech wired. These are people holding up the IU flag at the North Pole with a study that was going on, traversing the Arctic. I'll come back to. If you can see right down there, it was my kids about 8 years ago. But this is one of our classrooms with a video conference we had with Finland there. Oh, this particular book, by the way, is written with Kira King. Some people know it as the bonking book, but we won't get into that right now. Okay, we get a lot of returns from Australia. Sample projects that we were working on included projects that we looked at scaffolded learning from the Arctic. How were explorers scaffolding learning of kids in schools around the world through their expeditions? And kids asking questions of what they were doing, what was going on, what kind of expert mentoring was happening. We had projects where we looked at case learning online in large section college classes, as well as exam questions being put on the internet. In 94, 95, people were putting up exam questions for students to take in large section college classes. We looked at what they did. We looked at role play online, electronic role play and debate online. We had studies where we looked at, in one case they alternated face-to-face and online. This was back in 94, 95, 96 already. So more than 10 years ago. You might think you're first doing some of this now. The first online class was in 1978 in New Jersey. The first fully online was 83 at the Ontario Studies Institute for Education with Linda Harrison and her friends now at she's now at Simon Fraser. But people have been teaching online for more than 2 decades. So this is not a recent phenomenon. Okay? And I'll come back to this notion later on. We had people who are looking at the roles of the instructor. One of my students, Erping Zhu, who's now at Michigan, looked at how do we mentor, how do we contribute, how do we seek information, and do we wander around using a tool called Vax Notes, a real old tool. Okay? So we looked at the roles of people, and we looked at the instructor getting a horizontal training, collegial training, versus vertical training, where I'm more important than you are. And I'm going to tell you what you need to know. We had this adventure learning going on at the Arctic. We had the people traversing the tundra and kids asking questions of the explorers about local housing in northern Canada, about the loss of tree line, and all sorts of interesting things. And they were sent Arctic alerts, and they had to take on roles of famous people like Mahatma Gandhi and Mother Teresa and Sir Edmund Hillary, and they had to solve problems that the researchers were giving them in teams and small groups. And we analyzed their perspective taking, the levels of questions they were asking. This is one of the only K-12 projects that I'm going to show here. But we looked at whether or not kids who were older took higher level perspectives than the younger kids, and could we push them to higher levels of perspective taking, to be able to stand in someone else's shoes, or social cognition. We looked at the levels of questions. We found they were asking a lot of knowledge questions, but also a lot of evaluation questions. We looked at Bloom's taxonomy in that study. We looked at a face-to-face high school class where some kids over here were low participators, never contributed in class, some were high, and in the online, some kids who were low became high and some highs became low. They weren't allowed to, what we call BS in the US, online. But the lows here went from 6 to 24. The lows here went from 0 to 8. Everybody contributed online at least 6 times. Some people never contributed in the face-to-face. So there was a difference from what low meant and what high meant. We looked at on-task behaviors and off-task behaviors. This is a pretty consistent finding that students are very task-driven online. Whether we're talking about in a chat tool or in a free-mediated mode, which this is a tool called Aspects. I don't know if you've heard of Aspects, but about 15 years ago on Apple computers, there was a tool called Aspects where you could write on the same paper at the same time, just not the same line of text. You could share, do collaborative writing all around the world. It was developed at Duke University. I think it came out of Duke's area. But Aspects was a tool for sharing your papers and multimedia. 15 years ago. You would think we'd be well beyond that today, and we're not. It's really troubling. The tools that existed 15 years ago were amazing compared to what we have today, pedagogically anyhow. You look at WebCT and Blackboard and all that crap that we have. Okay, you know what I mean. I developed a course in '97 called the Smart Web. The Smart Web is only named the Smart Web because students had to build smart schools. We read a book from Perkins called Smart Schools and all this stuff. And we had a number of activities called the Starter Wrapper, Starts discussion, the Wrapper Wraps. We had portfolios. Every student had electronic portfolios. We had a cafe for discussing. We had field observation cases that they wrote up online using a tool called COW. I'll come back to that. Each one of those activities linked to a social cultural principle. And I have a paper called Pedagogical Activities on the Smart Web that's on my, go back to my publication share, you can read that. It's never been published per se, but it links social cultural principles to what you can do online. How to build intersubjectivity, how to get people to share knowledge, and so forth and so on. So that's the first story. That was story number 2. Now if you go back to your, you can maybe see that first story faintly, what if it got you lived 100. Now the 10 stories, I'll read them again. Number 1 is peace, dude, hop off the return key, save me some stress, don't yell out yet. Number 3 is do not ride your bike to work. Number 4 is look out for the Russians. Number 5, do you believe in the power of sharing? Number 6, do you want to be target practice? Number 7, if you are in but you're never there. Number 8, who needs a ticket? Number 9, where is Disneyland? Number 10, data at your fingertips. Now, I'm going to read off again. 1, 3, what? Number 7? Okay, number 7. You were in, but you're never there. Is that what you said? Or look out. Yep, you're in, but you're never there. Good one. Okay. Can you catch? Sorry. Okay, I was at the early conference where I met Joram back in 1999 in Sweden, in Göteborg. And I was walking through the halls that morning, and I was doing research with people from Finland on a tool called CAL that I mentioned earlier, CAL conferencing on the web. And they were analyzing, after doing this with me for 2 years, analyzing their student interactions as well as the students from Indiana giving feedback to their students. So feedback was coming from Indiana to Finland. The Finnish students were giving feedback to my students. My students all wrote 2 cases on the internet of problems. The students in Finland solved some of ours. We solved some of theirs. Then we added Korea in. We were solving their cases. We added Texas A&M, which is another country down there in Texas, and the University of South Carolina, another country. So we had 5 countries, and we had Peru, and we had the UK, Warwick University in the UK. It eventually became known as the Interplanetary Teacher Learning Exchange, or TITLE, the Interplanetary Teacher Learning Exchange. Well, in '99, we were presenting some of this work. I remember presenting actually there, and Susan Goldman and James Pellegrino were in the audience. I remember this clearly. I walking down the aisle, and they said, "Kurt, come here." I said, What? Well, look, we've analyzed you. I said, well, I need a psychotherapist. Yeah, Aunt, go ahead and tell me what my problem is. And they said, the students think you're in all the time, but we looked, and you only participated 20 times. You're never there. How come they think you're always there? Well, what I did was I strategically posted to the places that I thought were the most controversial cases. I tried to be the first one to post, and then everyone had to read mine because mine was the second post in the sequence, and I tried to add to the subject line to make it more interesting. The subject line is very, very important. Well, we compared the students from Finland, Korea, and the U.S., and we looked at and we found one group of students was very theoretical, one group of students was very social, and one group of students was very pragmatic and wanted the answers. Which group was theoretical? Finland, U.S., or Korea? The Koreans, right? Okay, then which group was social? Americans. And then which ones were the pragmatic? The Finns, right, okay? You're wrong on all 3, even if you said Korea on the last one. Think about it for a second. Americans are not going to be theoretical. The only thing possible is pragmatic. The Finns definitely were the theoretical ones. They went deep. They were reading American research from the 1920s and 30s and putting my students to shame. We interviewed my students, and they said, boy, we look dumb to our foreign peers. I said, yeah, you do. But we had 18 and 19-year-olds. In Finland, they don't get teaching degrees until they're 22 or 23. There's a difference in age group population, okay? And the Koreans, the Finns were going to teach English when they're done. The Finns could write English no problem. They wrote better English than my students. The Koreans were socially supporting each other's lack of English skills. They were very social online. Let me just point out some of this. So we had more U.S. students in this particular study than we had Finnish students, and we added Korea in later, and we did a content analysis using David Curtis's collaborative scheme that he had designed to look at whether or not we're exchanging ideas, giving feedback on ideas, whether we're help-seeking, help-giving. Of course, the U.S. students were help-giving and help-seeking. They wanted answers. They wanted to know the answer and move on. The Finns wanted to collaboratively come up with an answer and dive in deep and so forth. So it was quite a difference in there. But the U.S. there were seeking input. They wanted to get an answer. The Finns were reflecting more on things. So in here you can share knowledge, you can advocate ideas, you can socially interact. There are all sorts of things that you can look at in some of these analysis schemes. You can contribute ideas, you can plan. What's so nice about the activity level, Vygotsky's activity level, you can look at the thought process. So a lot of times they were contributing naturally. The majority of they're just contributing, and that's often a problem of online. People post and they don't get involved in interactive discussions. They just contribute and they move on, contribute and move on. They want to get the task done. They want to complete and push on. A sample of a Finnish case. As a result of this discussion so far, we've made some conclusions dealing with student motivation to learn. We agree it's impossible to motivate students deliberately, but McCombs, this went on for pages. Okay? This is a Finnish student actually collaboratively writing how to solve a case on motivation. In the U.S., we want get very focused on either feedback, on solving that case, contributing to that case, and so forth. In here he's saying, one day I came to teach the class and one of the 20 students is very quiet. He seemed to be all right at the time of teaching, but towards the end he started crying. The questions that were raised in my head were, okay, here are the questions. I want a solution. I want a solution to solve these problems. Social interaction among the Koreans, well, like a cup of coffee, maybe this new thing is relaxing. It must be the beginning. So I am happy now. I wonder whether someone could reply to me. I'm a bit nervous. Sister Sunny, take care of yourself. I hope your health will be good soon. Thank you for your interest in my health, but I'm all right now. Just before my long message to you has gone, So very supportive of one another, socially supportive. What we found were some high context and low context kinds of things happening. The Finns in the U.S. were low context cultures. Western culture tends to be low context, focus on the explicit verbal message. The high context Korean culture tries to look at the intention of the meaning behind and what's being conveyed. The U.S. students were very action-oriented, seeking results. The Finns were reflective and theoretical, and the Koreans were social and contextual. And I'll come back to this later, the U.S. students in solving a case would say, I feel, I think, and I believe. And that's another problem. And the Finns would solve with real citations of their books and so forth and so on. So some of the findings from this study is that you have to think about the cultures that you're dealing with when designing instruction. Was it a high context culture, a low context culture, and so forth. Not only that, in designing software tools and in analyzing, creating ways to analyze your transcripts. So that's the second story. We've got 2 stories done, number 2 and 7. Now I'll just read off numbers. Number 1, number 2, number 4, number 3. Somebody said 5. You said 5. I heard that explicitly. Okay. Can you catch? 0 for 2. Okay. Do you believe in the power of sharing? Now, this is my department chair, Jack Cummings, and Jack Cummings and I have developed a couple of schemes for analyzing online learning. Jack's wearing a shirt there, you see. What does it say? Yeah, well, that was his bachelor party. He was getting remarried. He's now 52 years old and he just had twins, so you can just get him another shirt. So Jack and I designed, Jack's in school psychology at Indiana, and he was the first one teaching Ed Psych online at Indiana. And he taught 7 students and he almost died. And he says, I'm going to become associate dean, so now you have to teach the class. And I said, it's got 20. You almost died with 7. I don't want to teach 20. He said, but you've been almost doing everything online. You got those cases online. You got this online. Go ahead and try it out. So I taught with 20 students, and what happened? I almost died. Then I had 25, and it was easy. Then I had 30. It was easy. It's the first time teaching online that's hard. It doesn't matter how many. You got 2 students. It's going to be hard. It's creating the contents. It's planning and designing and all those kinds of things. Okay. Well, Jack and I looked at 68 courses that were posted at the World Lecture Hall down there in Texas. Texas. Anyone from Texas in here? I had an instructor once who saw every talk. He says, hi, I'm from Texas and I'm stupid. No, I'm sorry. Okay. All right. Enough of those Texas jokes. Yorm spent 3 years in Texas. I'm sorry, right? How many years?
Back and forth.
Back and forth. He was trying to get out of that stupid place. All right. So Jack and I looked at 68 courses in the World Lecture Hall at Texas A&M. Texas A&M had the first place in 1994 called the World Lecture Hall, where people post their syllabi, their curricula. So you can see how accounting is taught, sociology, psychology, whatever. It's all sharing. They share their courses. Thursday's talk's all about sharing. We analyzed them. We said, instead of just instructors teaching something to someone, right? What about students teaching other students? What about experts coming in to teach students? We designed an interaction matrix, and this is our interaction matrix. What can instructors do to students? They can give you syllabi, notes, and feedback. What can instructors provide other instructors? They can give them syllabi and course resources. What can instructors give to practitioners? They can give them new articles to read, things to keep up in their field, tutorials, demonstrations. What can students provide to practitioners? We give them a resume. What can practitioners give to students? They can give them a field experience or a job. An online class can have all these things. Students can Students can give instructors their papers, evaluations, they can vote, they can give other students sample work, they can debate, introduce each other. We opened up the possibilities here by looking at what's done online. And we analyzed these classes, and we found, of course, most things that happen online are going to be instructors giving stuff to students, like assignments. We have class rosters and PowerPoints and web links, and a lot of Rafi's research, and David and his colleague, they look at a lot of computer use. This is a lot of what you guys do at Tel Aviv. You look at computer use. What do students provide students? Well, you can post students' work and republish their work. How many of you have asked your students, can I take what you designed here and use it next semester? And they all will say, yes, but let me make it better. Okay? Will they ever tell you that in a face-to-face class? No. In an online class, you say, let me use this as an example next semester. They'll all say, yeah, sure, no problem, but let me make it better after they got a grade. So if people ask you, which is better, face-to-face or online, there's so many other things that happen with online, derivatives, archiving of work, and so forth. It's not in the comparison. Why are we comparing things that are not comparable? It's stupid. We're not all in Texas, okay? Okay. Now, students to practitioners, none of them. Students to practitioners, virtual field experiences, 5%. Instructors to instructors, syllabi sharing, 100%. Instructors to students, journal reflections, 6%. Instructors to students, quizzes, 38%. Practitioners to students. Okay, you can see the small percentages in here. Practitioners to other practitioners, none, 0. 0. What this showed us is we're taking advantage of some opportunities on the web, but not all. Not all. So that's the third story. Okay, good. Let's go back to the beginning. We got number 1, number 3, number 4, number 6. What, number 9?
10.
You said number 9. Where is Disneyland? Okay. She can't. Oh! It's Frank. Let me try that again. Okay. Some of you may have seen me dressed up as Mickey Mouse a couple of years ago at Cisco Networking Academy, or at the WebCT User Group Conference in Orlando a year and a half ago. Well, I came out dressed in Copenhagen at the Cisco Networking Academy as Mickey Mouse. I went through the 10 mini myths of e-learning with someone dressed as Minnie Mouse. All the people from Eastern Europe didn't get the joke. In Western Europe, they all got it. All the people who've been to Euro Disney. But we went through, I had done a lot of survey research, both in higher education and corporate training, on the present state and future state of online and now blended. I'm currently looking at blended. I'm actually looking at blended in Korea, Taiwan, China, US, and UK, and Canada. In corporate training right now is a current study on the future and where it's going. I'm going to do higher education next. We're doing in 4 languages. Well, we've collected data, lots of survey data, and I try and give the summary of the survey in kind of as 10 myths, or kind of to get people to understand it. One of the myths out there is that college instructors are loyal. We found that very few college instructors taught as freelance. In the U.S., you can freelance. I don't know here in Israel if you can freelance, meaning you can make money on the side and freelance. Well, not many have done freelance in the past, but in the future, almost all were thinking about freelancing. Now, this was true both in our higher education survey as well as corporate training. It was true in our 2000 survey and in our 2004 survey. It's been a consistent finding. Another early finding in our 2000-2001 study was that, older people are the ones teaching online initially. Young instructors were not the ones teaching online. It was those with tenure in the U.S., with tenure, and full professors, associate professors, not the junior faculty, because they were too busy trying to get tenure. It was those over age 50 were teaching online. Now, in our follow-up study, it shifted away from being mostly male, mostly older males, experienced males, not older, experienced males teaching online, to younger females. Females outnumber males now. It's shifted in the past 4 years. There's been a dramatic shift in who's doing online.
When 900 years old, you, Rich, look as good you are not.
Okay.
Why is this shift?
I think in part the shift has happened because it's become familiar territory. It's become, I think, in part, it's become more familiar for people. I think there's more support on college campuses They have people that train you on what to do. They have some monies maybe to revamp your classes during the break sessions. They have better, I think, more user-friendly technologies, more familiarity. Early disciplines that did online learning were engineering, for instance, fairly male-dominated, but nursing, which is a fairly female-dominated, at least in our studies. Those are two disciplines that tend to be the first ones out. Now it's business seems to be doing a lot. What we call the low-hanging fruit. You don't need a lot of laboratory equipment for business, computer science, nursing, some lab equipment in engineering. It becomes more difficult in some of the science areas where you now are doing simulations online. It's a good question. Oh, and here you can see females outnumbering males then. Myth number 3, college instructors will flock to sophisticated technologies. In fact, the college instructors in Rafi's study and my studies all show they're using the simple tools that work, calendar tools, syllabus tools, file upload and download, asynchronous discussion, and so forth. They're not doing rich multimedia, but that's changing all of a sudden. We're now getting involved in more rich multimedia online than we had in the past. So that's a change that's happened over time. And I think Flash, in particular, Macromedia Flash is going to, I think the next year we're going to see it, we're seeing it already happening because the files are smaller. Number 4, college faculty just need a little more training on the web. And if you know anything about college faculty, it's not just training. They want other supports. They want time. They want money. They want release time. They want stipends and so forth, and we found that. If you don't tell instructors they'll do it for free, in fact, they want to do it for pay. Okay, they want to be paid for it, and if you've heard the movie, show me the money! Okay, Jerry Maguire, I don't know if you're familiar with our movies there. I've got a few of our movie clips in here. We also looked at trends, and some of the big trends now in enrollments in online are in certificate courses and recertification. If you look at the numbers here is over 60%. The number here and the number here, that's projected. What they're currently at for certificates is about 50%, and for recertification is about 20%. Those were the big two jump areas. The other ones didn't change much. They were about the same level, but it was people getting short degrees. That's why master's degrees tend to be online and not PhDs. Quality. The Sloan Foundation has a series of studies every year that are free about online learning. One of their findings is that administrators believe, or directors of distance learning believe, it's getting higher quality. Online's become better. It's going to be even better than face-to-face in 5 years. We replicated that finding in that today courses are inferior. In the future, courses will be superior. Both courses and learning outcomes are both learning outcomes inferior today, superior coming. We also found that they did not believe that wearable technologies, language translation technologies, language support, virtual worlds, tablet PCs, intelligent agents, and e-books were important. What they found were more important were reusable content objects or learning objects, wireless technologies, peer-to-peer. Remember this answer for Wednesday, by the way. You'll get some free money. Digital libraries, simulations, games, digital portfolios, and so forth. Interactive simulations. There's more conferences in the past year in interactive simulations than there was in the past decade combined. Simulations and gaming, mobile technologies are things where there's hot topics today. Reusable learning objects, more like reusable, we call them content objects. We are now doing a study, as I mentioned, on the present and future state of blended learning in 5 countries. And this is my research team. I've got organized to write in Chinese, Korean, traditional Chinese, simplified Chinese. Okay, number 1, number 3, number 4. What? 10. Number 10. Okay, I'm gonna do number 10, but I'm gonna, for the sake of time, not talk about everything in number 10 because it's got a lot of stuff I brought in number 10, and we'll see if I can get some more stories. I'm 0 for 5. Okay, we're currently collecting data at Indiana on our online MBA program. It's grown from 12 students to 1,000 students over the past 5 years. In '99, it started as 12 students. It's the only top 20 MBA program that's fully online in the U.S. We actually have a 1-week residency in the summer. So we've been doing content analysis of all the courses online. We analyzed them all. We did focus groups, surveys, interviews, you name it, historical document analysis, we've done it. I have a research team of 13 people on it. The business schools hired 2 of my people full-time. The people in red there have left, gotten their PhDs, and have moved on. One of the studies, we've gotten about 15 publications in 1 year on this project. It's just been a huge project. We've looked at the roles of the instructor, technical role, pedagogical, managerial, and social. Do they understand the pedagogically engaging content? Do they understand how to build socially interactive materials? Do they know how to build materials where students understand the course structure, the management, and technical skills? We then looked at, subdivided those roles into sub-roles. Within the pedagogical role, there was instructional designer roles, professional inspirer, feedback giver, and interaction facilitator. Within managerial role, there's conference manager, organizer role, and so forth and so on. We found that they were better at the pedagogical roles than the social roles or the technical roles, which was in part a good sign in that they were more focused on the pedagogy than they were on the technology. Finally, it's taken us how long to get to that point, Rafi? Okay, so we've got, in this case, in this study, we've got some positive things happening in terms of pedagogy, but there were some shortcomings, in particular the social role. These business professors didn't understand the utility or relevance of social interaction. They didn't understand, going back to the social constructivist principles I put up earlier, the importance of shared knowledge. So we're trying to create training programs for these faculty on that. We also did, typical kind of study that you would do as well, looked at the contents that were being used. What were the technologies that were used? Of course, they're all using textbooks. They're all using email pretty much. Most are using asynchronous discussion. Not many use synchronous discussion tools. Some use interactive quizzing and PowerPoint. We went and looked at the contents that were being used, the courses using, the courses not using them. We also looked at the kinds of activities, pedagogical activities, that were happening online. Were they asking questions of students? Were they giving feedback on their assignments? Were they involved in small team discussions, if you will? Did they have virtual office hours? Did they have online exams? And you can see some of the top answers here: asking, responding to questions, giving feedback, key points, team. In a business curricula, you'll see a lot of team activities happening online. So there's a heavy dose of team-related, case-related activities. We also have a paper that's in press looking at collaborative teaming and how to form collaborative teams online, how to get students aware of the tasks, how to get them aware of the technologies, and the social aspects of the cohesiveness of the groups. So we've built a model to look at that in a paper book chapter we have coming out that we'll be looking at that soon. We also looked at the strategies behind virtual teaming then. How do you organize virtual or online teams? What are ways to involve teams in discussion? How do you get teams to evaluate their work? How do you get students to interact socially about what they're doing? And then how do you make them aware of technologies that can facilitate the team functioning? Okay? So what are the technologies of choice? What's interesting in the corporate world, a lot of the students will say, forget about the technology at Indiana. It's great technology, but we have something better at General Motors, and we're going to use our stuff, and I'll let everybody use it for free. So they'll get everybody to call into a session, and they'll all use WebEx or Horizon Live or some of the Breeze or something like that for free, or Illuminate or whatever they happen to use. So we found a high focus on the task dimension. We found a medium focus on the social dimension and some focus on technology, although it changed or shifted. We found that faculty or instructors wanted the community. They wanted to share their ideas with other faculty members in lunches and so forth. We found that the students felt the program was very strong, in part because the faculty were excellent and they used the same faculty online as they used face-to-face. The faculty were paid extra money to teach online. Okay? They all liked this extra money, so they all volunteered. And it was a lot of extra money. It wasn't a little amount of extra money. It was a lot of extra money. Okay? More so than I've heard it. Our business professors are paid better than any professors in our school. And to teach overload, it was a huge... I almost died when I saw how much. So they got the same faculty for the most part, same contents, quality contents, good reputation, relatively low cost compared to going to Duke or Stanford or someplace like that. The barriers, the problems we found were the community, lack of a community being formed online, okay? Lack of, well, difficulties with team schedules. Some students might be in South America, some might be in Japan, some might be on the east coast of the U.S., some on the west coast, and having to form teams is always a difficult problem. They all wanted interactivity. The program sold students on having interactive contents, but that was 5-6 years ago. Now, technology's out there that can do more interactivity than what we had 5-6 years ago. And so students expect us to be doing wiki-related and blogs and podcasts and synchronous discussions and all sorts of things that they have in their corporations. They're doing podcasts in the corporation. They're using synchronous technologies, so they expect it. Very low dropout rates. And I've seen the dropout rates online get lower and lower over time. 5 or 6 years ago, we saw 30% in higher education, 50%, 60% in corporate. Now we're seeing on average 5-10% dropouts. We've become more savvy teaching online. The lack of community, lack of social presence, and lack of bonding was negatively correlated with dropping out. Stated another way, the more of a community, the more engaging, and so forth, the more likely students would be staying in the course. So community was important, engagement was important, and social presence of the instructor was important. One word to describe it. We asked them for one word to describe the MBA program. They said good, excellent, rewarding, effective, satisfied, empowering, but you'll always get negatives when you ever ask for the one word or 3 words to describe. You always get challenging, frustrating, all sorts of things go with it. Online's not the savior to everything. It's not going to be the best for every situation. It's an adventure. It's demanding. It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It's eye-opening. You get these all the time. Not everything's meant for online, and that's why maybe Blended has its role. They had some technology recommendations, more human interaction, more support from administrators, more training. We get this quite a bit. My more recent study is with ITT Technical Institute, which owns over 70 technical institutes in the U.S. We did the same kind of content analysis, same interviews, same focus groups. They're worried about motivation because they're a for-profit university. So if they increase retention rate 1%, their stock goes up. It's an interesting idea. So they hired us to do the same thing we did with the MBA program and to come up with a recommendation of where they needed to go. And again, we did the same kind of thing. I had another 10 people work on that. Those are some of the people listed there. I'm going to go back. Number 2, number 5, number... What? We did 5. Right? Number 3. Number 3. I heard the gentleman say 3. Don't ever ride your bike to work. One person got it. Yes. Okay. Don't ever ride your bike to work. In 1996, I believe it was a hot August day. I don't know if you know the singer Neil Diamond. He has this album, Hot August Night, from a long time ago. This was a hot August day. And I rode my bike to work one day in the 14 years I've been at Indiana, and that was the day. And Indiana is known for bike riding. I don't know if you know about the Indianapolis 500 race car race, right? We in Bloomington have the Little 500 bicycle race, so we're known for bicycling. I've gone bicycling one day in 14 years. I got there, and we were all invited to listen to a graduate student present. He had come from Northwest Airlines. And he said to us faculty, you should be using these tools. He's telling us what we should do is first day as a student. He brought us all in. It takes a lot of courage to bring all the faculty member from the best program. I'm in the best instructional technology program in the country. He brings us all in his first day as a student. He tells us what we should be doing. Okay? A lot of gumption. So I'm sitting in the back row listening to him, showing us all these asynchronous collaboration tools. This one and this one and this one. He's going through all the lists. And all of a sudden I get this knock on my shoulder. And Judy East nudges at me. I go, what? Kurt, you should be doing this. What? Yeah, you should be doing this. So I waited around. We taught it afterwards. And the person giving the speech, his name was Steve Malachowski. And Steve came up to us, and Judy and I were talking about what we could do in early field experiences for teacher education. And Steve sat next to us, and she said, Kurt should be doing this. So, oh, no. So we started off using a tool called COW, or Conferencing on the Web, where we got teachers, pre-service teachers, to reflect on their teaching experiences, initially at Indiana with 8 classes of educational psychology, where my old department, and we're all sharing online using COW, and there's a picture of COW. There's a cow. It's got, you have a conference level, you have a topic level, and you have a conversation level. You can only be at 1 of 3 levels. It's not threaded. The nice thing about COW, you can only be at 3 levels. You can find your posts very easily. With the threaded, you can go all the way down, right? So at COW, it's a star structure. You got 3 levels you can be at. You build a conference for your class, and then you have topics like motivation and classroom management or whatever, and then you have discussions wrapped around it. So, how do people in Indiana react to COW? What do you think? Good, bad?
Holy cow!
Oh, that's our sports
Holy
announcer.
cow!
Okay. The purpose of COW. The purpose of COW is to get students in field experiences and link those field experiences to their classroom activities. So they wouldn't be disconnected when they're out in the field. They'd be reconnected back with Indiana. They'd get mentoring from people around the world, not just their instructors, but people around the world would mentor them. They'd write authentic cases, not prepackaged cases. So Harvard business cases, no more kind of cases. Instead of me writing 5 cases on the about teacher education, they wrote thousands of cases every semester, thousands of real-world cases, and they got feedback, on average 4 to 5 pieces of feedback on every case. Instead of me getting feedback to 2 people like I've been doing here, everybody got feedback. The advantage of the internet is feedback, okay? And it got pre-service teachers to understand technology. They did technology in 96, 97, 98. So here's COW. You can go to COW, enter in, and go to Jyväskylä and Oulu and talk to people from Finland about their case problems in Finland or in Israel or in Peru or wherever you happen to be. We had cases like, or topics like, big global problems, classroom management general, classroom management discipline, poor teacher behavior, legal problems, motivation, multicultural education, and so forth and so on. Then they would go in through and create a topic like, in here, gender in the classroom, discipline disturbances, homework, love it or leave it. They'd write their own case, and here's the number of people that gave feedback on their case, 20-some pieces of feedback on one case. Okay? So they write, here's a student writing, my student in cocaine, where she had befriended a student in a school and came back the next week, and the student wasn't there, and the teacher says, don't worry about her, she's under house arrest for cocaine, she won't amount to anything anyways. And this pre-service teacher was kind of distraught, and she says, the classroom teacher has given up on the person because of this arrest for cocaine. What can we do for people in this situation? It's a pretty heavy kind of a case. We had a suicide case posted, we had all sorts of things posted. Problem solved by COW. It got people out of their isolated field experiences. It got them connected, their class materials, to their field experience. You can connect the book to the field. Powerful. Very powerful. It got them to reflect and be reflective practitioners, see multiple perspectives. We had the first semester 130 participants. We had 200 some cases the first semester, actually 624 2 semesters later. Cases per student, number of feedbacks per student, size of the case. We analyzed everything on these cases. Majority of cases were classroom management and motivation problems, instructional problems, individual differences, and in hot topics like violence and teacher burnout and corporal punishment, drugs, alcohol. We scaffolded their learning. We provided tips on how to give feedback to the instructors, to the mentors. We had one guy who called himself the mentor from Michigan. He had a PhD in physics and taught high school physics, but wanted to teach teach college. He volunteered to give feedback to every student, and he did that for 2 or 3 years. Every student case for free, he gave feedback to every one of them. He wanted to teach college. He never was hired by a college. He had a PhD in physics. He just wanted that experience. These people are out there. They're waiting to be used. We analyzed the transcripts. First of all, they had many unjustified claims, many social acknowledgments. They weren't justifying their reasoning. When we added Texas A&M in, as dumb as that state is, the students at Texas A&M were justifying the reasoning. They were citing pages out of the book. They were doing 3 steps beyond my students. Why? The instructor did a better job of training them what to do. Okay? Partly it was the instructor's variable. Mentoring, feedback, scaffolding, low-level questioning, high-level questioning. We looked at what the instructors, this is what the instructors were doing, what the students were doing. You can find a lot of unsupported reasoning. When we added students from Finland and other countries, the level of critical thinking went up.
Holy cow!
So, our major findings is COW enhanced student learning. It provided a linkage from class to field. It extended student learning. It got them to think beyond their own classrooms. And it transformed their learning because it got them to write their own cases instead of us writing cases. Students were attracted to cases that had interesting titles, that were controversial cases. Subject line is very important in online discussions. We then looked at Steve Malkowski and I, and Steve worked with me for 4 years, by the way. That one day we met, we ended up being partners, we still work together on some things. We then looked at the students and Finnish students. We found Finnish students co-authoring case solutions. They worked as collaborative peers. They were colleagues solving cases. You can see the length of discussion here, and they're trying to, here's a student trying to solve a case, okay? Here's a teacher from the U.S. giving vertical mentoring. The U.S. teachers were doing this. I know more, I'm going to teach you. The Finnish instructors were doing collegial mentoring. We're colleagues together. In fact, when this guy started getting feedback, he was giving Lena, one of the instructors, vertical mentoring. He wasn't even treating another instructor from another country as a colleague. Okay? I'll skip over some. Yep.
What you're showing us is very nicely how culture is superimposed on any use of the tools. Can you show of places that where tools managed to overcome the cultural superposition or imposition of itself on the learning?
Where culture, where the tool helps foster a collaborative culture, you know. In all cases, there's that occurring as well. I'm pulling out the couple instances where we see cultural differences. Keep in mind, there are thousands of cases being posted here. I'm pulling out a couple examples of differences, although there's striking differences here. Here's the student from Finland saying, my dear Vygotsky from 1936 said this. Here's students from Indiana. Very typical students from Indiana saying, I believe, I think, I feel. Not justifying their reasoning, not doing critical thinking, but the Finns were. So we see quite a striking difference. In fact, Tarula Angeli from the University of Cyprus and I have an article in the British Journal of Ed Tech that looks at whether students, what levels of critical thinking were they at. Now these tools, what they did provide is let the students from Korea, Peru, Indiana, UK, Finland all collaborate. So there is some sense of an environment, a collaborative collegial environment. We later created TITLE. We moved from COW to TITLE, the Interplanetary Teacher Learning Exchange, where instead of Finland having their own cases, US having their own cases, now, to answer your question, now we've got a set of cases on classroom management, motivation. You can't read that, the green part real well, but this is a community for everybody. We all went into the same community. We later created a set of best cases for educational psychology called the Case Web, with case A, case B for every chapter of a book. Anybody can go into these. We rewrote the cases. We got permissions. We got ethical human subjects permissions. We rewrote them, put questions behind every case, rewrote them so you wouldn't recognize the teacher or the student, and we put questions behind it. We then had collaborative quizzing online, where my students would go to these cases and solve them and get 10 points for every case solution and 5 points for peer feedback that they gave to someone else's class. Up to 5 points. They were graded. So we actually did collaborative quizzing online. We eventually see these cases expanding, case learning online through hypermedia, through mentoring, scaffolding, all sorts of expert cases with commentaries at the end of cases, shrunk cases, small cases, enlarged cases. You'd have a solution and then an expert commentary on the case, videos behind the case so you can see an actual situation and then solve the case after watching a video, expert practices, and so forth. Let's get to another number.
Four.
We heard number 8. The woman right here has been yelling at me for number 8 for a while. Okay, who needs a ticket? We created the COW project was with pre-service teacher. The ticket project was in-service teacher education. Okay, Sir Paul, thank you. This was a 5-year project with 25 teachers a year. In this, we had a team of people. Dr. Lee Eman and myself ran this for 5 years. Then Dr. Eman retired, so we haven't done this for 2 years now. We had teachers in cohort groups of 4 to 5, 6 teachers at school learning how to integrate technology in their classrooms in small, what we call rural schools, where they only have a farm close by. There might be a school, might be a few houses, but not much. But they all got $100,000 grants for technology, and they needed help with the technology grant money. We provided professional development on what to do, and we did research wrapped around it. We called the project Ticket. You can go into the Ticket website off my homepage and get to all the teacher projects. You get to the meeting hall. You can get to resources. We've gathered all sorts of mentoring resources free on the internet and so forth. We have goals behind the program. We have a model for the Ticket program that's just published in the Journal of Educational Computing Research this past issue. It took us 5 years to build the model, 3 years to publish it. You know how that goes. We wanted to link universities and schools together. Some of the teachers in the program, it was a blended program. We would train them in their schools on what they needed. They would come to Indiana for training, and we'd do training online using web, CT, Blackboard, OnCourse, Virtual U. We used all sorts of stuff, COW. So they would come and share in small groups and large groups by themselves, however they wanted to share what they're doing in their projects out in their schools. And they all became more computer savvy. We took them as novices, and by 6 months later, they were presenting at statewide conferences, national conferences. They had 10 months, 12 months of training from us, but it only took us 5, 6 months to get them to a level of sharing. We created a model, as I mentioned, of the Ticket program. I don't have time to go through the whole model, but it's on the CD, and it's on my website. We had them do mentoring online. Some of the teachers had their students in key Pell projects with students in Japan and Korea doing exchange programs. We had them finding best web resources on the internet and sharing them online. They all had a critical friend, someone who's critical of your work, but they're your friend, that they shared their work with, who was at another school. So instead of Lee and myself giving them feedback every week, they got feedback from their critical friend. Everybody wants feedback on their online work. What's nice about critical friends or web buddies or email pals, they get feedback from their peers, so you don't die teaching online. They were doing projects like electronic newsletters and web quests and computer conferencing and that kind of thing. Web quests or guided discovery learning online was the biggest thing they were doing. More recently, digital movie making, creating websites, all sorts of things. Here's some projects that students developed. This teacher here had his students develop the website for the school. He said he'd never do it again. It was a lot of work. This teacher here had his students do a survey on whether they could build a theme park in their area. Here's a critical friend post. She says, "You've saved my life. You've been the best. You helped me out here. You've been a great critical friend." In effect, we all are in this boat together learning with one another. We looked at scaffolded learning. Going back to early premises, we looked at how their learning was scaffolded. They got social acknowledgments. They got feedback and praise. They got to discuss their ideas. They got modeling and examples, questioning, and so forth. There was no one technique to teach. What was interesting here is that these were mostly master's level teachers. Master's level, they didn't want to read books that we assigned. They wanted to read articles that they picked. When we started picking articles for them to read, they were going to shoot us. We actually assigned our graduate student to give them reminders because they thought they would hate her. We wanted them to like us. And at the end of the semester, they said, "She was great, you guys were awful." Why? Because the graduate student provided them reminders, and they had busy schedules, and they needed the reminders every week. Very important to give reminders and structure the class. From then on, we were giving the reminders, so they like us. Okay? We also, instead of assigning them 5 articles to read, I gave them a book with 35 articles. You pick any 5. They liked it much better. These are professionals. Treat them as professionals. We did a study of technology integration in the schools. We found that across all variables we looked at, technology resistance, technology integration, proficiency, everything was better at the end of the program. They were less resistant, they saw less limitations, they were more proficient, they were more learner-centered, and so forth. More integrating of technology. They had a personal ambition and interest in technology, and the ticket program, that yellow line should be a little higher, the ticket professional development was important. Not money, not training, not grant money. It wasn't that. It was their own personal quests and goals and the support from our ticket program. They said it was the best program we ever had. The door is now wide open. Da-da-da-da-da. Okay, we got 2 minutes left. A story. Number 4, I keep hearing, look out for the Russians. I heard a couple of 4s I've heard here. People want to hear about the Russians. 2 4s. You're yelling 4. You're yelling 4. And you're yelling 4 in the back. Okay. All right. Look out for the Russians. Well, what happened when we were in Washington, D.C., and we had Russians visiting Indiana for 2 months. And one of my, I was mentoring a Russian scholar, famous scholar from Moscow Institute, Psychology Institute. And we had gone to Washington, D.C. to the SITE conference, the Society for Information Teacher Education. And after the conference, we're taking the train back, getting on a taxi to go to staying at my sister's house. And in the middle of Washington, D.C. are these Russians walking around. They hadn't gone home yet. They had kept them in Washington, D.C., not because they were spies, but because they needed them to evaluate grants. And so we took these Russians out into Washington, D.C. all night. It was a long, long, long night. And just let me say, watch out for the Russians. They'll take you out too long, too late. We were in no shape to present the next day. So, now, what were we presenting on? We had done a study using a tool called First Class. Some of you may recognize First Class. We analyzed students in a graduate class who are doing what we call starter wrapper technique. Starter starts discussion, wrapper wraps discussion. And we are looking at interactivity, participation, metacognition, and cognition in this starter wrapper technique. So the starter reads ahead, summarizes discussion, everybody discusses all week, and the wrapper summarizes. Now, one study we did of this, we got students to 90% in-depth discussion. Another study we did was at 67% in-depth discussion. The third study we did was at 10% in-depth. One study was with undergraduate students, one was with master's, and one was with doctoral. Which one was with undergraduates? 90%, 67, or 10? I hear 10, I hear 90. Which was with master's? In the middle. And doctoral? Okay, what was the master's students were at 10%, the undergrads was 90%, and the doctoral were 67%. Why? Doctoral liked to discuss online. The undergraduate needed the structure of the starter wrapper technique. The master's students didn't want to read anything we assigned to them. They were professionals in the field. They wanted to read their own, they wanted nothing to do with anything we assigned. So we've looked at participation. We found that learning became more student-centered over time, more cognitively deep. Students were social, cognitive, and metacognitive. In particular, cognitive. We found that they're doing a lot of judgments online, inferencing online, reflection on experience. This is hard to code. Metacognition is really hard to code, or thinking about your thinking. But Françoise Henry came up with a model in 1992 to look at online discourse. She's at McGill University in Montreal, I believe. And you may have read her work, potentially. Well, one of the key things we looked at was surface versus depth of thinking. Are they repeating their claims? Are they restating things? Are they linking new ideas? Are they coming up with new ideas? Are they in-depth? So in-depth, discussing advantages, disadvantages. These were doctoral students. They were 67% of their posts had some depth to it, either both or deep in their postings. They moved from being starter-centered, everybody focused on what the starter said, to when someone who was a starter dropped out, they didn't know what to do. When the instructor didn't reassign a starter and the student dropped, no one knew what to do. The starter's not there to start. At the end of the semester, it's very synergistic. Everybody's interacting with so-and-so. So we looked at and mapped out who's interacting with who over time. Some recommendations there are to have students print out their transcripts, bring them to class, and talk about their transcripts. Talk about their discussions. Do a blended kind of thing. Do online discussions for a face-to-face class. And the fact that first class is different from COW, is different from WebCT, it's different from Blackboard. Each of these discussion forums actually offer you, that even though you think that they're all vanilla and they all will be the same, they are not vanilla. They're not the same. So I think I got through 8 stories like I said I would. I didn't get through Peace Dude, Hop Off the Return Key and Save Me Some Stress. And Do You Want to Be Target Practice is my military story when I ended up at Fort Knox and I told them I'm going running in the morning. They said, well, you will go running in the morning if you want to be target practice. So, the little story about Peace Dude was just as a brief aside here, we had a student who, I'll just skip over here to Larry. We compared synchronous and asynchronous and found synchronous provided more in-depth discussion than synchronous. But Larry wanted to be entertaining. He was an older student in the class, a returning adult student who everybody wanted to read what he had to say. And he would say things like, Peace Dude, hop off the return key and save me some stress. I'm currently preparing my own anti-group support group. Group work support. I've noticed several people writing and saying this, they would do this or that brilliant or intuitive thing. I personally am brilliant or intuitive, and I think the rest of you used a little humility. Well, he was trying to get people upset, and he did a good job of getting them upset. But we got more critical thinking from Larry than anything else ever. So we designed a role called, the pessimist, the devil's advocate role, that we get people to get them engaged in discussing and debating. So Larry was one of the few times we found dominance kind of thing happening, but actually was everybody looked to Larry and wanted to read what he had to say next. So actually he went in depth after pointing out some things that wasn't really good. He went in depth and solved the case in a really elegant manner. So anyways, those are the 10 stories. I'm going to flip to the end here and thank everybody for coming today and staying a couple extra minutes. These are some of the places I see our work maybe going in the next couple of years. Podcasts, wikis, and blogs, and knowledge repositories, and mobile learning, and handheld devices. All these are areas that we can continue our work, I think, and looking at it from a social constructivistic standpoint, the 12 premises I went through earlier. I'll try and post this to Training Share. This was the longest talk, I think, of the week. Thanks for staying. Questions, maybe, if we have any.